The most expensive heist in Canada did not involve precious gold or cash. Instead, it was barrels of maple syrup. The maple syrup heist is believed to be the most valuable heist in Canadian history. In the year 2012, a group of thieves managed to steal nearly 3,000 tons of pure Quebec maple syrup worth nearly 18.7 million Canadian dollars. Let's take a look into how the Federation, who is leading the supplier of maple syrup in the world, got fooled, which cost them nearly 20 million Canadian dollars. The maple syrup Powerhouse. Maple syrup is an uncontested Canadian icon. Their Prime Minister bring it with them as gifts when they travel overseas. This shows how much importance is given to maple syrup by the citizens of Canada. Canadians melt them over snow and eat them off frozen stick. Also, the maple leaf is the front and center of the national flag. The maple syrup business is incredibly profitable. One barrel of syrup, which is about 500 to 600 pounds, costs nearly up to $1,800, which is equal to 20 times the price of a barrel of oil. Canada produces over 80% of the world's supply of maple syrup. In 2016, Canada produced over 73 million kilograms or 80,000 tons of syrup from producers, both big and small. Whether it's a mom-and-pop sugar shack that taps a handful of trees the traditional way with a hammer and a bucket, or a large-scale operation with vein-like tubes running from tree to tree sucking sap from sunup to sundown, the Canadian industry exported over $372 million of maple syrup to the rest of the world. However, Quebec is hands down Canada's maple syrup powerhouse. It produces about 90% of Canada's production, which is about 70% of the world's entire stock of maple syrup. As of today, somewhat 7,500 producers worked with over 13,500 farmers across Quebec to produce nearly 30 million litres or 8 million gallons of maple syrup every year. The heist. The thieves responsible for the heist managed to steal a staggering 9,571 barrels of maple syrup from one of the Federation-owned warehouses outside of Montreal, which is nearly 3,000 tons of maple syrup worth 18.7 million Canadian dollars. One of the thieves was in charge of the St. Louis de Blandford warehouse where the syrup was stored. It is for sure that every successful heist needs a person from the inside. A total of 12.5% of the Federation's maple syrup production was stolen, and the barrels that were stolen were worth nearly 2,000 Canadian dollars. The heist was almost successful as they had not been caught for over a year. People always wonder, why didn't anybody notice the barrels were missing? Well, it was because the thieves had planned out a brilliant heist. They swapped the barrels that were nearly identical from paintwork to the build and filled many of those kinds of barrels with water. To make it even more real, the thieves put stickers on the barrels that were perfectly identical to those put on by the Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers. The stamps looked very much official. It wasn't until some of the barrels started to rust that got the attention of the Federation inspectors. When it was further investigated, the Federation inspectors found that some of the barrels were empty. One of the inspectors nearly died climbing to a pile of barrels. If they were filled with syrup, they would have been much heavier and much more stable to climb. Looking for the stolen sweet product. The Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers notified the police, which involved numerous police officers and detectives, as finding maple syrup was tougher than finding stolen jewels, gold and cash, as most of the syrup could have been already digested. The police needed to do their best as the Federation wanted their syrup back. The police conducted nearly more than 200 witness interviews and eventually made 26 arrests in connection to the crime. Over 40 search warrants were executed and some of the syrup was discovered. However, a significant amount of the syrup had already been sold or consumed, and most of them were never recovered. Police gained an upper hand when the forensics compiled a whole lot of clues left behind by the thieves. Scratches of forklifts were found in the barrels, which the Federation never used. This made the police investigate where the forklift was brought from, and stupidly, one of the thieves had brought a forklift using his name. This heist was a complex criminal endeavor, and some of the people arrested played a key role in the success of this heist. One of them was Richard Valieres, who was fined 9.4 million Canadian dollars. Refusal to pay would lead to 14 years in prison. The fine was eventually lowered to 1 million Canadian dollars. How do people have the brain to steal nearly 300 tons from a Federation warehouse but are stupid enough to buy a vehicle for theft in their name?